Welcome to another episode of One-on-One with Mitch Lafon. Joining me this week from the Alice Cooper Band, it is drummer Glen Sobel. We talk about his new DW drum sponsorship, replacing Tommy Lee on some Mötley Crüe dates, of course his work with Alice, and the band that was supposed to save rock and roll, the Beautiful Creatures, which he was a part of with former Guns N' Roses guitarist DJ Ashba. So we talk about all of that stuff. So why wait? Let's just get right into this. Here is the one, the only, drummer Glen Sobel. We are speaking with Glen Sobel, drummer for the Alice Cooper Group. Good day, Glen. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
How are you, Mitch? Good to hear from you.
Good. I'm doing quite well, actually. So you've got this exciting new tour that just started with Alice not too long ago, where even Nita and some of the other members went to Facebook and other places and said to the fans, what songs did you want to hear? How is that going so far?
I think people are surprised about how many changes there were in the set, which we're all glad about. And we still have some songs that we're going to interchange, and even while we're on tour, there's still songs that can be brought up from Alice saying, well, hey, why don't we work on this one and then work on that one? We don't have to play these at every show, but we can rotate them in and out. That makes it good because there's people that come to multiple shows. That's just how it is. So you don't want to always have the same exact show.
No, and you can't do that. I think that's important. I think when you look at bands like Springsteen, Metallica, Pearl Jam, one of the reasons they're so successful is that they keep it interesting for fans.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Springsteen and Pearl Jam. I think those are bands that definitely jam things out, which is something we don't do. I mean, this is more like a Broadway show with blood, I always say, but things are timed out, gags and props. So we're not really jamming out. I know Springsteen can do 3 hours and Pearl Jam can play for quite a while. And yeah, they've got longevity and they change up their shows a lot. And it keeps the people coming back. What keeps people coming back to the Alice show is just that they love the theatrics of it all. And so we try to maintain that.
Yeah, and there's so many songs that I want to hear, House of Fire, Pain. It just never ends. But let's talk about you first. You're working with a new drum company now, DW.
Yeah, I just announced that in January. Yeah, I'm so excited. I mean, look, anybody could say that, whatever blah, blah, blah company I play, that's the best because they think, well, you're paid to say that. And no, DW is the best drum company on the planet, and most drummers would agree with that. If you took a tour of their factory and if you saw the attention paid to detail and craftsmanship, I mean, the main guy, John Good, he's basically a wood expert, a wood nerd. And the way that they cross-pollinate all these different woods and going vertical and going horizontal, slanted, whatever, it all makes a difference on how the drums sound. And it's been great. I've been happy, they're happy, and I can get a lot out of these drums. I don't have to play them so hard to get a nice, clear tone out of them. I'm loving it.
So talk to me about that. For musicians or people out there that have never been sponsored, how does a company approach you, and how does that work in terms of, do they just say, you're our guy, here's a new drum set, have at it, or do you have any responsibilities?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Yeah, that's a mystery to a lot of aspiring musicians, drummers I'll talk about because that's my field. But yeah, they think like, man, here's a video of me ripping on YouTube. Give me a free drum set, but it doesn't quite work that way. I mean, sure, there's been some child prodigies and there's been some YouTube-centric drummers that do build up a following, and they do end up getting some level of endorsement. But my first endorsement deal was with Regal Tip Drumsticks way back, and that was like you could say it was like a B-level endorsement where I got 2/3 off of cost. So I was paying, but it was a lot less. But they saw that I had won the Guitar Center drum off at a pretty young age, and I had known the lady that owned and ran the company, and that's how that happened. That's all based on personal relationships, getting to know the people in the artist relations department and the marketing department, just like any other business. It's got to be based on who you know. And with the case of drums, with DW, I've been with them as an endorser of their pedals for 17 years, since 99. And then they recently acquired Gibraltar that makes the big spider rack. I had that for 3 or 4 years. They acquired that company, and it just made sense to go with DW all in. And they're located near where I live, 20 minutes outside of LA. I can go down there and I can take care of business. And the head of marketing is a guy I go way back with. You got to be buddies with the people at the company. I mean, they've got to be into what you do. You have to be into what they do. And the more people you're exposing their drums or cymbals to, the more likely they are to give you an endorsement and, you know, maybe an A level where you get the free stuff and the ads. There's a lot of factors there. You know, am I explaining it good here?
Yeah, very clearly, actually. And it's interesting because, like you said, there is that misconception. As a fan, you just think, so-and-so is endorsing this. He must get a whole bunch of free stuff. But do you have obligations where they say, okay, now that you're our spokesman, we need you 5 times a year to go give a speech at such a conference? Or is there anything on that end? Or is it just really...
Well, yeah, that's a good question, too. It depends. There's an event at DW at the factory in July. They call it Factory Day. It's like an open house type of event. They asked me to appear there. And that could be considered like one of those type of things, you know. But it's easy. I live close by, so not a big deal. But do drum clinics, and they sponsor the clinics. They all kick in on the fee, which is also part of the endorsement deal. If they feel that you can book a drum clinic and people will show up at the various dealers, the retail shops around the country or the world, they'll chip in. You know, if you get 5 endorsement companies plus the dealer chipping in, then it's not too much of a financial burden on them. And my job is, you know, promote the product, promote drumming in general, make sure that the kids coming there with their parents want to play drums and keep this whole art of live music going and alive, have the banners displayed at the store promoting the product because they're the ones responsible for having these events. And it's all about the drum industry, you know, being a big cheerleader for the entire industry in general and for the endorsement companies in particular. And then I get to play whatever I want, play the tracks, Alice tracks, my own stuff. That's all part of being an endorser. You're doing clinics and appearances. You're proudly displaying the logos when you play concerts and on television, photos, whatever. All that and more.
All that and more. Let me, if I can, start talking about your past, and I'll start at 2001. You're in a band called Beautiful Creatures at the time. Lot of industry buzz about it, a lot of magazines, because we had magazines back there. We had some internet, but a lot of magazines were Album of the Year, Best Thing Ever, Ozzfest, everything. And then after that, the band sort of just faded away, unfortunately. But talk to me about that first.
Yeah, what the hell happened, right?
Yeah, well, what the hell happened? Because, you know, that first album, just called Beautiful Creatures, was on everybody's top 10 list. Everybody was excited. They were like, this band is going to save rock. And I saw you, you know, and I saw you at the, where was it? I think it was called the Tweeter Center at the time in Boston. And it was a great performance. It was one of the highlights of that day for me, especially since it was like in, 100-degree heat. So yeah, what happened? And let's go through where it started and where it finished and what went right and what went extremely wrong. And I'll ask you this also about Ozzfest. A lot of questions coming at you. Were you invited to be on Ozzfest, or were you bought on Ozzfest? And for those who don't understand,
you're asking a dangerous question there.
Yeah,
you're not supposed to.
Well, because you're not supposed to talk about.
No, the label paid. It's Warner Brothers. They bought us on there. All the baby bands, their spots are bought and paid for, usually by their record labels. There's exceptions. If there's a management company that has a larger band, and then they also have a baby band that's also going to be maybe on the festival, they can work a deal. I mean, it's all politics, and this is nothing new.
No. And listen, for those who don't understand, a lot of the festivals, that's actually how they make their money. You've got one or two main headliners, and then the rest buy on, and that's how it's financially feasible for everybody. So,
Sure. And you need the headliners to be the main draw. And then the rest of the baby bands, they're either on their own or there is some sort of financial backing where they're buying on. That could be from a label or from an independent source. It's really not a secret.
Yeah, and it's nothing to be ashamed of,
Back then it was more of a secret, though. It's like, well, you're on Ozzfest. You must be, you made it, But really, that was the first thing we did. That was a great summer because, well, okay, you asked what went wrong, what went right. I'll tell you one thing that went wrong. I got this crazy memory. People know me. I remember dates. I'm like Rain Man sometimes. But, like, the last date of Ozzfest was August 12th, 2001. Our record came out August 14th, 2001. So we were on this whole tour the whole summer, and there was nothing to sell. Nowadays, it's like, forget about the hype. Just tell people when your record's out. Do almost like what Beyonce did. Surprise, I got a record, And you don't have to be that drastic about it, but too much advance hype burns people out, and they forget when your thing's ever coming out. And just put it out, let them know. So all this money was spent on being on the tour, and then our tour bus and our salaries. It wasn't that much of a salary, The record itself, way over budget, stupid, wasteful spending. Although we're all very proud of that record, but by the time the record was coming out, we were already in the hole for X amount of dollars. This is a common mistake. And when it's a major label budget and you're doing a photo session, well, that photographer, he's really going to stick it to the label because he knows he can, and whoever else is charging the label, like the studio or the text. We had a great producer, Sean Bevan. He earned his money. Boy, did he. And all of us, we still get people coming up to us around the world with copies of that CD to sign. DJ Ashba, who people now know for 6 a.m. and Guns N' Roses, well, him and I go way back. We go back 20 years. And I used to play in his instrumental trio just locally in L.A. Cool melodic instrumental stuff, but we kept in touch when that had ended, and one day I get a phone call from him. I could tell you the date of that phone call even. This is how crazy I am. It was October 24th of 2000 because it was the day that Linkin Park's first record came out. And the reason I know that is because it was the same A&R guy. And actually the person making that call was that A&R guy. DJ was on the other line. It was a three-way call. I didn't know he was there yet, but I knew the A&R guy. Long story. It's always a long story. I'm just giving you the bullet points here.
Right.
Yeah. He calls me up going, Glenn, I got this new band. We need a drummer. It's this band, Beautiful Creatures. I said, yeah, I know those guys. He's like, well, what do you think? You want to come down here and meet with the guys? And I swear to God, this is true. I was on my way out the door to sign a record deal with a label called 1500 Records. It was with a band I was playing in with Sendog of Cypress Hill. It was a band called SX10. It was like a real heavy rap metal hybrid thing, which was doing great at the time. And Sen was all about rock and metal, so it was just perfect for him. So I'd been playing in that band, but they were not that busy because Cypress Hill was real busy. They had that huge hit, Rock Superstar. That kept them on the road. So basically the side band was really the side band. So literally I was on my way out the door to sign a deal. And I got this phone call. It was funny. I'm like, do you know where I'm going right now? I'm about to sign over at such and such office. And it was just one of those funny things. So I held off on signing the deal. I met with the guys. We jammed. We hung out. And I ended up joining the band right before the record was recorded. So it was good timing on that end.
Do you, and I just want to take back what you said before, that the product came out after the festival was over. Was that a decision by Warner Brothers to build such an excitement and then have, boom, here's the record? Or was it just a complete, or do you think it was just a mistake? Because it would assume, listen, as a layman or as a fan here, it would appear, I should say, to me that if you're on tour from June, July, August, your album should be out like the last week of May and then being sold at the venue, right?
Well, just because someone runs or works for the label doesn't mean they're going to do things the right way.
Okay.
What can we say? We're in a band. I mean, I watched such stupid money get spent on that record that got wasted, and it was top dollar. Studios like that, the big ones, when it's a label, they'll charge a lot of money. But if it's an independent artist, they'll adjust their rate. It's a sliding scale. So, yeah, there was just too much spent. And, yeah, you're right. The record should have been out as we were on tour. There was a lot of buzz. We had a lot of people loving it. Like, finally, a rock band is back. This is awesome. The only other band that was out there doing something was like Buck Cherry. They came out in '99, I think it was, on DreamWorks. And, yeah, I watched them start to really get promoted. Their original drummer, Devin Glenn, was a really good buddy of mine, and he was telling me about it all before it really hit, and all of a sudden they're on MTV and VH1, and, it's like the label really pressed the button on the promotion, put a lot into them. And so we were kind of like Warner Bros. Going, oh, okay, rock. We could do this. It's about time. It's been maybe close to 10 years since grunge kind of wiped the slate clean. So let's bring back some leads and some vibe and, that Sunset Strip, Guns N' Roses and AC/DC. I mean, we all love these bands. So we all saw eye to eye about what the influences were. They needed a drummer that followed that same path, I mean, I've got like the jazz background and all that, but I'm a rocker at heart. I hung out in the Sunset Strip when I was 16, 17. So that's where that was coming from, and Warner Brothers thought, well, okay, it's time for this.
Yeah.
But things got messy.
And I remember also being a reporter back then that the album we had in advance, and it was sort of hailed as this is going to reintroduce rock, real rock, to the masses. And, and for those, by the way, who don't know Sean Bevan, he also worked on Chinese Democracy from Guns N' Roses.
Yeah,
so there you go.
For like a year and a half.
Yeah, and I wonder if DJ worked with him on that, or if DJ suggested him for
Not
that
on the
gig.
record.
No, okay.
Not on the record, no. Sean worked on Chinese Democracy before coming to us.
Oh, really?
And I thought, by the time we were working with Sean, Roy Thomas Baker was working on Chinese Democracy. And it's funny that we were recording at a certain studio in L.A., and we'd be leaving at midnight, and Axl would just be arriving at midnight to start work on, they were in a different room. And that was back in 2001. The record came out, 2008?
2000. So wait, see, this part of the story I didn't know, and that's what makes it so did you have a chance to hear of anything that Axl was doing, or was it really like lockdown secret, everybody get out? Or
oh yeah, we didn't even try to, it was upstairs. We weren't going to go over. Oh, let's sneak over and try to listen. Nah, we weren't interested in trying to do that. But yeah, I thought that Sean might have had a connection with DJ getting in Guns N' Roses, but I don't even think that was the case. It was through some other channels. You'd have to ask him. But yeah. DJ has always been cool with me. He's brought me into things when he can. I did the very first 6 a.m. gig back in 2007. And it was one of those things, just like I did the Mötley Crüe something on short notice. 6 a.m. had this big press conference thing, and it was about the Heroin Diaries, the book that Nicky wrote. And the first 6 a.m. record was kind of like a soundtrack to the book. I think there were songs named after the chapters.
Right.
Even.
Right.
And yeah, Beautiful Creatures had long been pretty much over, but DJ called me one day. It was like a Friday, and 6 a.m. rehearsals began the following Monday, and I didn't get the music until Sunday. It was just one of those things, I guess the deal was that Will Hunt of Evanescence was going to do the gig, but he got the Evanescence gig. Good for him. So,
right.
But then he wasn't able to.
And formerly of Scrape.
Right, of course, yeah.
See, that was another band, Scrape, Beautiful Creatures, and
cool.
and Buck Cherry were supposed to save rock back in the early 90s. And
and they all came out around the same time, Buck Cherry being first, I think, and having the most success, definitely.
Well, okay, so you mentioned Tommy Lee. Let's talk about that, because I actually saw 3 shows last year on the Crüe tour, and I saw one in Quebec City that you
Oh,
got.
yeah.
I did, and it was great, and it was
The
also
last one.
yeah, the last one, and it was a bit of a strange show
Last one of
because
that leg. Last one of that leg
Right.
that I played on. 'Cause they had a break for a couple weeks after that, and Tommy got some cortisone injections, and he came back, rejoined us a couple weeks later in Europe, and he was fine.
so talk to me about that because you're on tour with Alice, you've got that set list, that rehearsal, those things that, and then all of a sudden they say, hey, you're now going to play with Mötley. What kind of adjustments do you have to make, and does it get to be too much physically? I mean, do your shoulders and knees just go, hey, dude, slow down here?
Well, they did bring down a masseuse a couple times that week to the venue, which it was needed, but it's funny how much the body can adjust to certain things. I try to stay in shape. I work out when I'm at home, and I work out on the road as best as I can. But yeah, that was an interesting day. We were in Buffalo, and I got a call from Mötley's production manager, and he said, I got to talk to you about something serious. Can you fill in for Tommy tonight? And the first thing I said was, okay, who's effing with me? Who's messing with me? I totally thought it was a joke, because some of those guys are jokers, you know. But he assured me it was for real. I said, okay. Send a runner, send a person to the hotel to get me to the venue, have Adam, that's their sound guy, have Adam make me a copy of the most recent show he has, because they were recording their shows a lot. It's easy when you got all the hard drives. Give me a show on a thumb drive. I need to take it with my laptop into a production office at the venue and spend a few hours with it and make cheat sheets. I'm a music nerd. I started in school. This is why I always talk about the importance of having music in schools. I started in junior high, and I started with a snare drum, reading quarter notes and half notes, and then I was in marching band in high school, reading. I was doing all that. And so making cheat sheets, it has to do with reading music, but you're not writing out note for note. It's more like a roadmap. And I've been doing that for years. That's why I'm able to fill in on something on short notice. And I had a music stand up there. I told the production manager, I said, send somebody to get a music stand with a light that can be attached to it because it gets dark up on stage. And I spent, 4 or 5 hours making those notes. We had to do our Alice set, and then right after the Alice set, I still had a couple more songs to listen to. Did it help that we were on tour with them for a while on and off? Of course. Of course it helped. But they definitely had some different arrangements from the original recordings, things to make room for pyro cues, and just some different arrangements. Home Sweet Home, the drums don't come in on the first chorus, they come in on the second verse, stuff like that. So if I even thought like, yeah, I know this song, no, I got to make notes just to make sure, because there's bombs going off next to the drums and pyro and Mickey's flamethrower bass, and my whole priority to myself for the first show, I said, look, it's not about putting on a performance, just get through the show. And after the first show, then it became, a lot more comfortable, and I think they were surprised that they didn't have any train wrecks or major malfunctions. It wasn't a flawless show, but we got through it and then some. It was fine. It was good.
Were they sort of expecting you to crash and burn? Did they have a backup plan?
I don't know if there was a backup plan. I really don't know. I mean, Nikki knew that way back I did 6 a.m. on short notice like that, like 3 days notice before the first rehearsal. I'm assuming he remembered that. But, watching us play every night, it's like, okay, it's obvious if someone can play, but then filling in like that, it's a different skill set. It doesn't make me a genius. It just means I'm a guy that reads music, and you got to put your ego aside. You can't go, well, that drummer played it this way, but I'm going to do it this way. No, you can't do that. The best compliment you can get when you're a sub is that they forget that you're there. Like they turn around and go, oh, that's right, Glen's playing tonight. That's what you want. And, Tommy Lee is a huge influence. I mean, just about every rock drummer can say that. So that helps as well. And we used my drums. We scaled it down to just one rack tom and 2 floor toms, and had his monitor rig, which is just massive. Ours is already big sounding with the Alice thing, but Tommy's got all these extra big subwoofers behind him. And Of course, there were fans that were disappointed. I would have been disappointed, too. It's my last chance to see Mötley Crüe, and Tommy's not playing drums with them. He would come out after about 3 songs, and he would explain what's up with tendonitis, and then the show would go on. And he'd play piano on home at the end.
You know, I got to say that having seen the show and having seen Mötley in the past, I was actually glad to see you, not because I have anything against Tommy. Obviously, I love Tommy, but it's one of those shows that, 10 years down the road, you can say, I was at that show. I saw 11 Kiss reunion shows, and they did one where the drum tech, Ed Cannon, stepped in for Peter. And I keep thinking,
I heard about that.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, that's the show I would have liked to have seen, because that's one of those, you go, I saw the rare one. I saw the different one. So, I'm glad I saw the 2 shows with Tommy, but I'm also very glad that I saw the show with you, because, in 15 years from now, they'll be, oh, you saw one of those? And I'll be like, yeah, I did. How cool is that, Listen, I'm in Montreal. Go ahead.
5 of those shows. And, if 14-year-old me knew that I'd play in Mötley Crüe for a week like that, I would have never believed it. Of course, it was great, and they were nothing but cool, every one of them. And they, brought me up to the front of the stage to do the final bow with them, and Tommy would hold my arm up, and he said cool things in the press. He didn't have to do any of that. There have been other sub-situations with other drummers where things maybe didn't go so smooth as far as the attitudes that people would hold afterwards or during, so everybody was really gracious. That was a very cool experience.
Yeah, that was great. And like I was going to say, being from Montreal, I have to ask the Canadian questions. You were on Pleasure and Pain by Sega, and of course Sega's been around since 1970.
Sega? You mean Saga?
Saga. Sega, sorry, Saga. Right. They've been around since 1977 about. See, there's the about. See, I threw the Canadian in there anyway.
Yep, I heard that.
How did you get involved with a great, iconic Canadian band, and what kind of experience was that for you?
Right, that's always the question. How did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, that one, Jimmy
sorry.
Crichton. No, that's all right. Jimmy Crichton, the bass player, was living in L.A., and he owned a studio called Sound Image, which was right in the same complex as Sound City, the place that Dave Grohl did the whole movie about. And I did a couple of sessions there, but one of them in particular was the record I did with Jennifer Batten, Michael Jackson's old guitar player. That was a record that came out in '97.
Yes, and Jennifer, by the way, I interviewed recently. She was out with Uli John Roth and Andy Timmons, a great lady.
Yeah.
Great talent, might add.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when I do drum clinics, I still play along to a couple of the tracks off of the record I did with Jennifer. It's called Tribal Rage.
Yeah, she's great.
And so I was recording with her, and here I go again. I was recording with her there in August of '95, right, at Jimmy Crichton's studio. I remember the dates. And then it was November of '96, Steve Magus wasn't going to be flying down to L.A. for whatever reason. Mike Sadler was living in Germany. He flew in. I got this call from Jimmy going, hey, man, can you do this? I said, sure. And we basically put stuff together in the studio. It was one of those things. It was Jimmy's place, so there was no real time constraints. So we were able to sit there and in one day come up with riffs. They come up with riffs, and we record 1 or maybe 2 songs in a day without any rehearsing. Just come in, put it together. There's a lot of bands that have done that over the years. So that was like maybe the second record I ever played on, second or third. And yeah, they were all really cool. Great guys.
And a great band. They still do shows here and there. Boy, there's so much more to ask you. Let me finish real quick with Beautiful Creature, since we were talking about that. The second album was Deuce. You didn't do all of it. Ace Frehley's drummer Matt Starr came and did some of that. Was there a point somewhere in there where you just said, this isn't working, I got to go? Or what happened there where you're not on the entire album?
Well, the tracks that I am on, I think there's just 2. I think those were originally demo tracks that were recorded maybe a couple of years before that came out. So not like we went into a studio and planned on recording 10 or 12 songs. There was a couple of songs recorded, and they spruced them up, and that ended up as album tracks, which, you know, I didn't realize until the record was about to come out. But it's cool. It's all good. And Matt was the guy that joined the band after me back in 2003. I was having a little bit of issues with my neck at the time, so I needed to have a break anyways. So that also kind of facilitated that changeover. I needed a break. I was doing this other gig at the time, this guy in Arista named Brooks Buford. He was like a southern rock rapper, which actually the producer was Tommy Henriksen.
Oh, there you go.
Alice band. Yeah, Tommy was the producer on that, and his co-producer was Jeff Pilson. I used to record a lot at Jeff's house. I used to just keep a drum set there. And so I was involved with that, and then to also keep doing Beautiful Creatures and dealing with this next stuff, it was just too much, so I had to choose the stuff that was getting me paid, like, in the moment. You know, you do a record, especially something that's not on a major label, there's back end only, if anything. Back end meaning you get money later if and when the thing sells, you know.
Right, which means you never see a dime because
well,
the accounting can get very creative.
The thing I hate, you know, back end is fine, but when people start saying, oh, yeah, can you do this on spec? You know, you're speculating that it's going to make something, and then you'll get paid if and when it does. It's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Spec means don't expect to get paid. But,
exactly. But let me get onto that. You mentioned the neck injury. You replaced Tommy when he was out with an injury, but you got replaced when your neck gave up on the Alice Cooper gig. How are you doing these days? Because you haven't. When was that, by the way? That it was 2013 or 2014?
Summer. It was summer of 2012.
Was it really that long? It was that long ago. Okay.
Yeah, I missed about 5 weeks. No big deal in the big picture. But I told that to Tommy. I'm like, dude, I've been in the exact same position, and for probably a lot longer than what you're dealing with here. It sucks to watch another guy play your gig. It's like watching another guy with your girlfriend, you know, and then he totally laughed, and he knew I got it. And I wasn't trying. I was trying to do my best Tommy Lee impression on the drum, you know, down to the fill. And yeah, I would get better with that each night. I'd keep going back to the recording and listening, and it's like, how did he do that? And there's a certain vibe and energy and swing that he plays with. No one will sound exactly like him. Every drummer sounds different. But I did my best to, you know, do the impression, and that's what was important there. And so it would suck less for him to watch being injured on the sidelines, you know?
Yeah, and it's also different in the sense that with Mötley Crüe, Tommy knows that no matter how good you are, he's coming back, whereas when you're in a situation like with Alice, though I don't think Alice would do this because I don't think he's that, but the next guy could come in, and were you nervous that the next guy was so good that they might just say, hey, Glenn, we love you, but we're going to move on?
No.
Okay, good.
Not a bit.
Okay, because you never know. And then let's finish with Hollywood Vampires. You played on I don't even know if it's called an Alice Cooper album, but you were on the Hollywood Vampires album. How was that recording with Joe Perry? Of course, Tommy was there. Of course, Tommy Henriksen, not Tommy Lee, of course. Alice, and how was that?
Well, you know, it's funny when you're recording records, you don't know who was ever in the room at the same time. I can tell you, the one track I'm on with Joe Perry, I think that's Jeepster, the T-Rex cover. But Joe was not in the studio when we did that. The people that did track live, and we did track a lot of stuff live, which is cool. I'm on about 5 or 6 tracks on that record. It was me, Tommy Henriksen, Johnny Depp, and Johnny Depp's buddy Bruce Whitkin played bass on a few songs. So the 4 of us would be in the room together, and sometimes Alice would even be on the mic in the control room. So a lot of records these days, they don't get made that way. It's like, okay, you got maybe a drum machine program, and then guitar players play their parts and bass does their part. Drums could be last, man. It's crazy. Or you get drums first, and guitar and bass are playing along, but they're not keeper tracks for the bass and guitar. They're scratch tracks. They're guides. And they're going to really do the real guitar tracks later. And so people picture everyone in a room together. That's not that common. But we were at least 4 of us in the room together. But Joe, no, he wasn't there when we recorded that.
Well, so there you go.
With
And
the technology today, you can trade files back and forth, and you could have 4 people in 4 different countries, and you can make a record real easy.
yeah, that's a great thing. You know, in 2013, I did this Kiss tribute that included Matt Starr and all these people, and it was all done basically from the computer in my bedroom. They would send me tracks, and we would all be put together, and it turned out quite nice, actually. But there you go. Looking forward to seeing you on Saturday up in Orillia, Ontario. It's a 12-hour driving event for me to drive there and back, but definitely worth it for Alice Cooper.
Oh, you're coming to that show. Right.
Damn straight, and it's about a six and a half hour drive to get there, and then 6.5 hours home. But I wouldn't miss it for the world. It's a great venue, and of course, it's Alice Cooper, so it's worth every
that's
mile.
the one. That's the one where the next day we get to go home for a little bit of a break before we head to Europe next month. Sure, so we'll be in good spirits, and be happy to get back to the regular Wednesday gig I've been doing. We didn't even talk about that. That's been a very cool thing.
Let's talk about that. You're doing this gig in at Lucky Strikes out in LA called Soundcheck Live. Talk to me a little bit about Soundcheck Live.
It's billed as sort of a jam, but it's a very hyper organized jam. Everybody knows what's going on ahead of time through emails and lists of songs and who's doing what. But I'm part of the resident band when I'm in town there on Wednesdays, and man, it's been a blast. It was where Ultimate Jam Night was on Wednesday nights, which was Chuck Wright and Matt Starr. They moved that. That's still going on. They moved that to Tuesdays at the Whiskey. I haven't had a chance to make it down there yet to play, but I hopefully will on the break. But yeah, Wednesdays, our thing is it's a cool resident band, and we're covering a lot of styles, and we don't repeat any songs from week to week. They call it No Repeat Wednesdays, and so as the resident band, we play in the first set, and the second set is usually a guest, like they call it a guest curator. That's how we bill it. So the guest gets to choose whatever songs, whatever players. We had in week 1, that was a great week, we had Nuno Betancourt as our guest curator for set number 2.
Oh, that's great.
And the whole idea is getting some of these guests outside of their normal gigs. They can play their songs if they want, but with Nuno, we did Sign of the Times by Prince. We did Supermassive Black Hole by Muse. And on the Prince song, Nuno picked up the drumsticks and played timbales. We did a percussion jam. We did cool stuff like that. And then the third set is everybody jams together. And we had Orianthi. We had her in there, did Voodoo Child. We had Sebastian Bach show up, and we had everyone on stage for School's Out. And it's a really fun night. It's free to get in. I can't believe what a great deal it is for getting in free. Last Wednesday, I was away for it, obviously, but last Wednesday, Jackson Brown was the guest curator for set number 2. We've had Phil X doing it, and that was a good time. So, yeah, it's the place to be on Wednesday night if you're in LA.
I haven't been back to LA in a few years. I got to get out to this stuff. And here, I'll finish on one. Your discography, which I looked up for before we did the interview, lists you as having played on a Tiffany album. Now, if you go back to 1985, when I was a teenager, Tiffany was the thing for me. How did you end up on a Tiffany album, by the way?
It's not a Tiffany album.
Okay.
That's a single track that's on one of those
compilations.
It's on one of those tribute records.
Gotcha.
It was a tribute. I think that was the tribute to Cher, put out by Cleopatra Records.
Gotcha. Okay.
They used to knock those things out like quick. And so there was this one studio. The producer was Lanny Cordola, and it was me and Chuck Wright. We used to do a lot of sessions with Lanny. And so I think it was The Beat Goes On, I think was the song. I didn't meet Tiffany. We just recorded our parts, and she did her thing. And then on that same record with Mötley Crüe, we also did this punk rock version of "I Got You, Babe."
Oh, really?
And
That's funny.
Yeah, and that might be on the internet somewhere. I don't even have a copy of that. But funny thing is, I never met Mötley back then. But then years later, I was doing some showcase gigs for Trev Lukather, and Cherie is Trev's aunt. Trev's mother being Marie Curry. And so in Trev's band is Cherie's son, Jake. And I said, by the way, Jake, I played on this thing with your mom years ago, this tribute to Cher. And he's like, no way, that we used to talk about that. Like, who is that drummer? And it was just this cool little moment. And Cherie, it turns out she lives right near me. And, of course, the movie Foxes is just a classic to me. And, yeah, she's just really cool. And that Cleopatra record with Tiffany and her and all that, yeah, it was one of those.
That's
tribute
awesome.
Deals.
That's awesome. And
yeah,
and
the music business is so small. And I get up on all these tangents because how funny it is that this business, it's like LA is this giant city, but the music business is tiny.
yeah, it's like 10 people running it. And I have to admit, on my end, I interviewed Tiffany somewhere around the 2000s, maybe 2000. And it's still one of my favorite interviews just because it was so random. Here I am talking to the I Think We're Alone Now girl, 25
Right.
years after it was cool. And yeah, I just love that interview. It was sort of this random 15 minutes out of nowhere. So there you go. Glenn, always a pleasure. And
I love it.
people still love it. And my daughter loves it. That's what she grew up listening to for some random reason again. But we shall see you Saturday. Continued success with Alice Cooper. And there you go. We got it all in, I think.
Hey, always great to talk to you, Mitch. You bring out the good stuff, the good questions.
I try to dig deep and I try to tell a compelling story. So there you go. And I think we succeeded. Thank you, sir. See you Saturday.
Thanks, Mitch.
And there you have it, folks. My interview with drummer Glen Sobel from the Alice Cooper Band. Please check me out on Twitter at Mitch Lafon and on Facebook, one-on-one Mitch Lafon. Thank you, as always, for listening, and thank you for Glenn for being a part of this. Bye for now. Oh, my.